Germany's parliament has voted by a wide margin to legalise same-sex marriage. The parliament voted by 393 votes in favour of same-sex unions to 226 against. It comes after Chancellor Angela Merkel did an about-face that freed members of her governing Conservative bloc to follow their personal conscience rather than their party line.
Es war eine lange, intensive, für viele auch emotional.
It was a long, intensive debate, she says, and for many, an emotionally moving discussion. This also goes for me personally. That's why I hope the vote today not only promotes respect between different opinions, but also brings more social cohesion and peace.
Sondern dass damit auch ein Stück gesellschaftlicher Friede und Zusammenhalt geschaffen werden konnte.
Many other European countries, including France, Britain and Spain, have already legalised same-sex marriage. The measure is likely to be signed into law by the President sometime after July the 7th.
Italy is threatening to close its ports to migrant rescue ships operated by NGOs, which it suspects are being exploited by people traffickers. The country has been increasingly struggling in recent months, with tens of thousands of refugees reaching its shores. Well, the Italian Prime Minister says his country has been forced to take drastic measures and wants his EU neighbours to help.
This message doesn't come from a country that wants to break the rules or abandon its humanitarian position. It's a country that is under pressure and which asks our European allies for a concrete contribution.
I'd like to say that we want to help Italy to address this issue.
Obviously, we have to discuss the issue together. We do believe we can't leave either Italy or Greece on its own.
They keep saying that we will not let Italy alone, but in fact, all the measures that they have forecast or they try to take were not effective. This is quite worrying because if this trend will not be stopped, the risk of social crisis, social tensions, or racial tensions between Europeans and immigrants will become increasingly higher and higher.
The mayor of a French town says he's going to put pork and only pork on school lunch menus. His plan is to ban alternative options in order to promote a more secular society, although the idea isn't proving too popular with some.
We are putting an operation in place so the children eat everything and their diets are balanced. There is too much waste, so we will teach them to eat meat, be it poultry or pork.
Today, we're talking about secularism in a generally anti-Muslim way. We see secularism as a tool of tolerance and living together and not exclusion. Any pupil who refuses to eat pork should feel at ease.
We were saying that Muslim people want to have their own rule. That's not true. That's completely false. We, French Muslim citizens, want to be equal. We don't want to have more. We don't want to have less also. They are not asking for halal meal. They just want to have the possibility to have as much protein as the other children as we usually do in France.
This is not about racism or Islamophobia or whatever. This is about just creating communities within the French society. French society is not going well. 20% of the youth are unemployed. We've got terrorist attacks. We've got major problems. I do not think that this is the good time for the Muslim community to say, we want specific food or we have specific rights.
A Trump supporter got more than just a cup of coffee on a recent trip to Starbucks. Kayla Hart was mocked by the staff at Starbucks just for wearing a T-shirt supporting the president.
When U.S. Army veteran Sean Kilbane saw it, he called the president's supporters in the area to stand up to Starbucks by holding a sit-in at the same Charlotte, North Carolina store.
There were about 50 supporters of President Trump who participated. They came here with just the hope of initiating positive conversation and discussion about the policy issues.
And she was just wearing a Trump T-shirt, just coming to get a cup of coffee, and was, ridiculed and mocked.
A Charlotte woman says she was wearing a Donald Trump shirt when she ordered a coffee from this Starbucks a couple weeks ago. But she says on her cup, instead of her name, an employee had mockingly written, "Build a wall."
I didn't think it was the end of the world, but it's just one of these little tiny pieces that they all add up to a much bigger problem.
Starbucks issued an apology to the customer, but this group wanted to make a statement.
We wanted to show that, one, we're not going to be bullied. We're not going to be vilified or persecuted for our choice in who we choose to as our leader.
This weekend's support for that customer came in the form of dozens of coffee orders.
It was a positive environment.
Local supporters of President Trump swarmed the business over the weekend, placing orders and engaging everyone they could in what they hope was constructive conversation.
Let's all come together. Let's focus on the issues that matter.
A Starbucks corporate spokesperson says the cup joke was a poor judgment call and added they were actually pleased with the sit-in, saying, "This experience has served as a reminder of the power of human connection. We look forward to continued conversation."
It takes a bigger person to rise above it all and reach out and shake somebody's hand and, quite honestly, turn the other cheek.
Little negativity, so we did it.
Today marks the 10-year anniversary of when iPhones first became available for sale. The game-changing device revolutionized the smartphone industry and put many computers in the hands of billions. A decade later, a new study reveals how having so much information at our fingertips is costing us brain power.
Now, according to the researchers, quote, as the smartphone becomes more noticeable, participants' available cognitive capacity decreases. Your conscious mind isn't thinking about your smartphone, but the process of requiring yourself not to think about something uses up some of your limited cognitive resources. So it becomes a brain drain. Now, they induce brain drain, smartphones, by occupying limited capacity cognitive resources for the purposes of attention control. And while smartphones have improved many of our lives and made things easier, also provided more entertainment for us, they do come at a cognitive cost because they create a deficit that we haven't seen before in human history.
Israel is already known as a startup nation, and it looks like the Israeli National Intelligence Agency Mossad is about to start capitalizing on Israeli ingenuity to update its spy technology. Mossad has set up an investment fund to facilitate the development of new techniques and technologies in the shadowy world of espionage. They're offering grants of up to around $600,000 for new high-tech projects. According to a government statement, Mossad is looking for new technology in the fields of robotics, encryption, and miniaturization, as well as automated data analysis. Developers who receive grants from the so-called Libertad Fund will retain the rights to their products. The Mossad's only looking for non-exclusive usage rights. Another mortar has hit the Golan Heights, and it took place at the same time that the Israeli Prime Minister was giving a speech in the region's capital of Katzlin, just 10 miles away. On Wednesday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was speaking at an event to mark the 40th anniversary of the founding of Katzlin, when a stray shell from fighting in Syria landed nearby. It's the fourth shell in a week to land in the Quneitra area of the Golan Heights, and for the fourth time, the IDF has responded with a strike on a Syrian army position. This time, it appears as though the mortar was fired from that position, but Israel always targets the Syrian army either way. Israeli policy is to treat all attacks coming from Syria as the responsibility of the Syrian army. The Israeli Prime Minister is saying that Israel is not involved in the bloody conflict in Syria, but he's pledging to respond with decisiveness and strength to any violation of Israeli sovereignty.
The world's chemical weapons watchdog said the banned nerve agent sarin was used in an attack in northern Syria in April that killed dozens of people. The report by the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons has confirmed this after interviewing witnesses and examining samples. US Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, says an independent investigation will be conducted to confirm who was responsible for the attack. The attack on April the 4th was the most deadly in Syria's civil war in more than 3 years. Syrian officials have repeatedly denied using banned toxins in the conflict.
Russian foreign ministries sharply criticised Washington's claims that Syria's government's planning a chemical attack in the country. The ministry is concerned that terrorists could instead take advantage of the threats coming from Washington and carry out false flag attacks to encourage US military action.
The US officials refuse to confirm the claims with any facts. The situation looks like a massive provocation, both military and informational.
I look at the US experts and they say openly that extremists could use these claims by Washington, make provocations and shift blame onto the Syrian government.
Recent statement from the White House alleging that the Syrian government was planning an upcoming chemical attack. Are you concerned that that could have created an opening for terrorist groups to carry out a chemical attack?
No.
You're not concerned, even though al-Nusra, al-Qaeda groups have been using chemical weapons in Syria? That's documented?
No. Next question on Syria.
The eyes of the entire world are going to be on Hamburg next week as President Trump will meet with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, face to face for the first time on the sidelines of the G20 summit. US National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster says no specific agenda or topic has been set up yet. The main question will be on whether Russian interference in last year's US presidential election will be addressed. President Trump has praised Putin in the past for being a strong leader, but he denies having a personal connection with him.
Nervous Iraqi troops checking exhausted civilians. Finally free after months trapped in the battle to retake Mosul from the Islamic State militant group. Iraqi forces and their allies say they're just days away from fully liberating the city, which ISIL made its capital 3 years ago. Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi declared on Thursday the end of ISIL's self-proclaimed caliphate in the country. But some die-hard ISIL fighters are still bottled up in a handful of neighborhoods. The army is retaking the old city meter by meter to try and protect the civilians still trapped within. In a huge symbolic victory, troops seized what's left of the medieval Al-Nuri Mosque. ISIL proclaimed its caliphate from that mosque 3 years ago and blew it up earlier this week as the US-backed forces closed in. The past 8 months of fighting have devastated Mosul, leaving thousands of civilians killed and nearly half of the city's population displaced.
Income for the Islamic State has dropped by 80% over 2 years. According to a study of its finances, an extended air campaign and loss of territory hit the oil and tax revenue streams for the militant group. The self-proclaimed caliphate earned an average of $81 million in the second quarter of 2015. This year, during the same period, the group has only earned an estimated $16 million. The report comes from IHS Markit, a global data monitoring company. In particular, the Islamic State has ceded territory back to Iraq as Iraqi armed forces have run the militants out of their strongholds and enclaves. 2 years after winding down its military operation in Afghanistan, NATO has agreed to send more troops to the war-ravaged country to help train and work alongside the Afghan security forces. The move comes in response to a request from NATO commanders to provide around 3,000 troops. Speaking ahead of the NATO defense ministers' meeting in Brussels Thursday, Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said that 15 nations have already pledged additional contributions, and that he expected more pledges later in the day. U.S. and allied forces have been fighting for nearly 16 years against Taliban Islamists who harbored al-Qaeda militants behind the attacks on New York and Washington in September of 2001.
Now, a court in the U.S. says the government can seize a tower owned by an Iranian charity group known as the Alavi Foundation. The court claims that the group is controlled by the Iranian government. Also says the Alavi Foundation has been complicit in financial dealings with Iran in violation of Washington's sanctions against the country. U.S. court verdict allows prosecutors to seize the 36-floor building, which is estimated to be worth nearly $1 billion. Under U.S. law, the charity has a right to appeal this ruling.
North Korea's provocative, destabilizing, and inhumane behavior will not be tolerated.
On Thursday, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin announced new steps his department is taking to try to cut off the flow of money to North Korea's weapons of mass destruction and ballistic missile programs. The department has proposed blocking a Chinese financial institution's access to U.S. banks. The Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN, said the Bank of Dandong is a financial institution of primary money laundering concern.
This bank has served as a gateway for North Korea to access the U.S. and international financial systems, facilitating millions of dollars of transactions for companies involved in North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile programs.
Mnuchin also announced sanctions against 2 Chinese individuals and a shipping company. The latest move could create some issues for the administration's budding relationship with China, so Mnuchin made sure to get a particular point across.
We are in no way targeting China with these actions. Again, as I said, this is not directed at China.
On June 20th, Trump tweeted that while he appreciated the efforts of President Xi and China to help with North Korea, it has not worked out. That led to questions about whether the administration would continue to try to get China to put pressure on Kim Jong-un's regime.
I don't think the president is giving up in any sense. I think we will continue to work with China and everyone else.
The U.S. State Department plans to sell about $1.4 billion worth of arms to Taiwan. It'll be the first such sale under the Trump administration and will most likely anger China, which considers the self-governing island its own territory. The State Department says Congress has been notified of the 7 proposed sales, which include an early warning radar, high-speed anti-radiation missiles and torpedoes.
NBC has reported that Chinese officials have urged the United States to immediately halt its $1.42 billion worth of planned arms sales to Taiwan. The comments, which came hours after the State Department announced the proposed sale Thursday, are the latest twist in Washington and Beijing's complex relationship since President Donald Trump took office. China's embassy to the U.S. said in a statement late Thursday, the Chinese government and Chinese people have every right to be outraged. China sees self-governing Taiwan as a renegade breakaway province. The U.S. does not officially recognize it as an independent state, but remains its sole arms supplier.
Chinese President Xi Jinping is in Hong Kong, marking the 20th anniversary of the city's handover from British to Chinese rule. On Friday, Xi inspected more than 3,000 People's Liberation Army troops in the largest military display since the transfer. Xi repeatedly shouted, "Hello, comrades," and "Comrades, you are working hard," from his motorcade. The troops responded, "Hail to you, Chief, and serve the people." Xi will oversee the swearing-in of Hong Kong's new leader on Saturday.
North Korea is calling for the killing of former South Korean President Park Geun-hye. In a joint statement, Pyongyang's security ministry and prosecutors said, quote, "We declare at home and abroad that we impose death penalty on traitor Park Geun-hye." The statement was broadcasted June 28th by the Korean Central News Agency, or KCNA. It goes on to claim that North Korea recently discovered evidence that Park tried to assassinate leader Kim Jong-un in 2015. However, it does not provide any details on what that information is. KCNA reports that the government is also ordering the execution of the former director of South Korea's National Intelligence Service, Lee Byung-ho, who it said colluded with Park. North Korea has ordered both Lee and Park to be immediately turned over. Park was ousted from presidential office in March and is currently standing trial on corruption charges in the South Korean capital.
President Trump held an evening strategy session with newly elected South Korean President Moon to discuss the threat posed by nuclear-armed North Korea.
I know you've been discussing with our people some of the complexities of North Korea and trade and other things, and we'll be discussing them all.
But the allies have different views on how to deal with Pyongyang. President Moon favors diplomacy, while Mr. Trump is already ratcheting up the pressure on Kim Jong-un's regime.
It's clear that we can't repeat the same approach, failed approach of the past.
That failed approach McMaster is referring to is former President Obama's efforts to pressure the country through crippling sanctions. But with continued weapons testings and American student Otto Warmbier's death at the hands of the Hermit Kingdom, McMaster says continuing that same approach would be insanity.
New York City's subway system is kind of a mess right now, and the state's governor is getting involved.
The current state of decline is wholly unacceptable. And we're going to do something, and we're going to do something about it now.
Governor Andrew Cuomo declared a state of emergency for the New York City subway. He also pledged to funnel an additional $1 billion to the Metropolitan Transit Authority, but it wasn't super clear where that money would come from. In recent weeks, the city's subway riders have suffered through long delays, power outages, and even a derailed subway car. Because the state runs the MTA, Cuomo has taken a lot of the criticism. Cuomo has asked returning MTA Chairman Joe Lhota to reevaluate the agency's structure and how it spends money. Any major additional funding will likely have to be approved by the state legislature first.
Health officials in California said 111 people have ended their lives under the state's Right to Die law. California's End-of-Life Option Act went into effect June 9, 2016. The law allows California residents over 18 years old to request life-ending drugs from their doctors if they have a terminal illness and want to choose when they will die. California's Department of Public Health released a new report June 27th, highlighting data from the first months after the law went into effect. The report said from June 9th to December 31st of 2016, 258 people initiated the life-ending process. The majority of people who used the law were reportedly cancer patients, and the median age at their time of death was 73. California is the 6th U.S. state to enact Right to Die legislation. The first U.S. state to adopt similar legislation was Oregon back in 1997.
In recent years, the world's population of bees has been decimated, and scientists aren't sure exactly why. But a new study finds that the most widely used kinds of pesticides could be part of the problem. According to the journal Science, researchers found that exposure to neonicotinoid pesticides made honeybees and wild bees less likely to survive through the winter. Field studies conducted in Europe showed that a large group of honeybees died off over the winter in the UK, while Hungary saw a 24% drop in the bee population. The European Commission is working on a proposal to ban neonicotinoids, which is also a demand of many environmental groups.
Just strolled in like he owned the place last week at the outdoor festival. The renowned Vienna Chamber Orchestra was performing a Mendelssohn symphony at the time. The audience was quite amused and started laughing and clapping. The festival organizer says the curious dog stayed on stage for about 5 minutes before getting up and leaving. Such a fine taste in music.
I love that. I play classical music at home with Lola, and she falls asleep right away. She's like really relaxed by it.
I should try to use that on the kids. I'm going to steal that, Mare.